Hey there, I'm Jonathan, and I want to take a few minutes to tell you the second part of my story. If you'd like to see the first part, you can check out this link right here. The first part is about how I first came to know Christ, and this piece is about kind of the next chapter in my life. It's called Then There Was Junior High. You remember those years, right? For some of us, we locked them away in a dungeon, a dark place, hoping that they would never rear their ugly head again. Man, these were tough times for me, and there are a couple reasons. The first one is something we all deal with. It's that word puberty, right? That's that part of life where all our hormones are going crazy all at once, and every day is like the best and the worst day ever. And that, of course, makes this part of our lives challenging. The second piece for me was social things related to middle school. I didn't fare very well in that, and it didn't help I was big. I was really big. And my last name, when you put an F in front of it, comes out to Fatwell. And, you know, that's good. That's good material for bullies. And I dealt with a little bit of bullying. And if I were to describe this time of my life, the word I would use to describe it is I felt abandoned. I felt like I was all by myself. And I know that's maybe a little dramatic for a white kid from the suburbs with a good family, but man, that's the way I felt. I felt alone. And then there was my youth pastor. Man, my youth pastor, I'd show up every week at church, and he always acted like he cared about me, because he did. And the word Fatwell never escaped his lips. And there was this day in 8th grade when I fled to sin to try to make myself feel better in the midst of my abandonment. And what instead happened was that abandonment was complicated by this layer of guilt. And as I was trying to struggle through this, I found that youth pastor who cared about me was there for me, and I began to realize he was there to listen. He just listened and spent time with me, and I began to realize that was the love of Jesus. That's what he was expressing by just being willing to sit and spend time with me. And as I committed my life, I committed my life to Christ in a new way. But it was this everyday kind of way. I'd realized that Christ had become my constant companion, and prayer began to be this constant communication between God and me. And I began to understand those words where in Deuteronomy 31, God says, never will I leave you nor forsake you. In the Bible, I became hungry to read the Bible because those were his words. And I began to understand them as his words to me. He was the one who would deliver me from this dark place I'd found inside myself. And at this point, my whole life became about Jesus. I probably made my friends crazy about that. It was like I became some kind of philosopher monk who saw that every relationship and every circumstance in our lives were these neon signs pointing us back to God. But there was still this tension. There was still hurt, and there were still fears and sins that I just couldn't escape. So I ran to faith. And I began to realize I wasn't ever going to beat this darkness. So I kept running to Jesus. And I knew somehow he accepted me, and he would never abandon me. And he promised that. And some days it felt like that promise was all that I had. And I began to understand something that I wouldn't really understand until years later. And that's this word, grace. That's what the next chapter is going to be about. And so I want to ask you, when did your story change? How did it begin to grow up when you faced adversity? Did you find maturity? Who was there to guide you as you looked for more from faith? Did you find God in your dark place? Did faith in Jesus become following Jesus for you? Man, I'd love to hear your story. If you'd like to send me a note, info@crossroadsfortworth.org, I'd love to hear from you. Or share your story on Facebook or on YouTube, and send me a link. I'd love to hear your story about where you are with God, what challenges you face, what challenges you're facing now. Thanks for taking a few minutes to listen to the second piece of my story. I'll be back soon with the next installment.